Well, I have my opinions on why the sport isn't as popular as it could be.
Yeah, sure. Let's hear
I
it.
mean, so like right now, I can, well, maybe not this fall, but in normal circumstances, I could say, okay, my kid's a Steph Curry fan. I could look at the schedule. I could bring my kids, and Steph Curry is most likely going to play, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know,
Oh, for
right?
sure. I no,
Right?
I hear where you're going with this. I
Right.
feel you. I feel you. You
And
don't see anybody.
the thing is that in track and boxing are the only two sports where the athletes decide where they're going to compete, right? And if they're going to compete. So this clicked in my mind a few years ago when we were at the 19th Street Cafe and walking to Hayward Field. And I'm walking with Pat Devaney and Mike Finelli, two of the most knowledgeable guys in track and field, and myself. And we're going to watch the qualifying for the World Championships in the 10,000 meters.
Right,
And
right,
we're asking each other who's running.
right. You don't know.
We don't know, right? We don't know who the hell's running. And so how do you sell advertising? How do you get people in the stands? I mean, you need competition. I mean, you think back in the 70s, you had Marty LaCour and Jim Ryan, right, in Pennsylvania, right? How many people watched that? Freaking everyone, right? Because you had the
Yeah,
two studs going against each other, and LaCour won. But you just had more head-to-head competition,
yeah.
and that's the large part of it, right? It's like Salazar setting up the 10,000 after a dual meet up in Oregon with Adrian Royal, the guy who beat him in the previous fall, right, at cross country nationals, and a vastly overweight, out of shape Henry Rono and
That's
him.
what Roto,
And
yeah,
Rono won,
exactly.
right? But
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
Rono against Salazar, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's just
And I think,
no, go ahead.
and that's a, no, I think that's the purity of the whole thing too. Is like if you asked, and you probably would know the times for that, but for the vast majority of things, like times are, but there's this huge focus on time rather than this idea of head-to-head competition.
Right.
And yeah, the fast times will come if you beat people, but this idea of just getting people to race each other is critically, I mean, it's critically important just to see, you know, see who you like and who you want to back, and create a little
Yeah,
bit of rivalry. Like that's
you need
fun. That's
good
great.
guys and bad guys. So
Yeah, you do. You need
another
personality, man. You need some
another
villains.
kind of off the beat story here. Uh, so I don't know if you guys know Steve Miller, but Steve Miller's high up in track and field, and him and Vin kind of go back and forth. And anyways, Steve Miller was the head coach at Cal Poly, and a good friend of mine, Joe Fabris, who ended up being head of marketing and sales for Microsoft, a sub 4 minute miler,
Yep,
right? Miller was his coach.
of course.
And so Miller went from Cal Poly, he went to Kansas State, and one of his athletes from high school was John Capriati. So Capriati came to Cal Poly,
Jeez,
right?
really?
And then Miller went to Kansas State. Capriati followed him to Kansas State. Miller became the AD at Kansas State. And then he got the job as global marketing head at Nike. So
Yeah.
Miller was head of the Barcelona Olympics for Nike. And Capriati, so first he was in charge of athletes at Nike, and then he left that position and brought in Capriati to be in charge of athletes. So that's where that came from. Anyway, so Miller ends up retiring after the Barcelona Olympics. Well, Fabris is working at Microsoft, and his office mate is an engineer, and they both cash out at about 40 years old, right?
Yeah.
And his office mate has this dream of making the Pro Bowlers Tour. So he tries for 5 years to do the Pro Bowlers Tour, and he doesn't make it. But he ends up buying it for $1.5 million. And he's an engineer, and he calls up Fabris and he says, I'm an engineer. I don't know how to run this thing. What do I do with it? And he says, hey, let me call my old coach, Steve Miller, who just retired. He knows how to do this stuff. So uh, the engineer hired Miller to be the head of the Pro Bowlers Tour. So
Yeah.
Miller calls up, his plan is to make you're a good guy, Josh, you're a good guy, and JT, you're a bad guy. And
Yeah,
Josh,
like
Josh
wrestling,
says,
like WWE.
right, you make characters, right? And Josh says, I don't want to be a good guy. I want to be a bad guy. Nope, Josh, you're a good guy. And you're going to go to these events. And I don't want to go to
Yeah,
those events. Well, you don't want to be part of the Pro Bowlers Tour, do you? So he had these matchups, and you could sell advertising, and it got on ESPN, and now you look at it and you go, holy shit, look at this thing, right? It all started with good
Yeah,
guys and bad guys and competition on a consistent basis, right? That you could sell advertising on. And then people
yeah,
could count
Oh,
on it. And you could tune in
that's good.
and see Jim Ryan versus Marty McQuarrie,
yeah.
right?
And there's pockets of that too, right? Like I feel like the shot put is perfect for this. Like shot put, pole vault.
Pole
You got
vault. I mean, I
Mhm.
mean, those two guys in the pole vault, they're genius, right? They go
yes,
up against
yeah,
each other and they promote each other and they're not afraid to compete, and
yeah.
so, it's really
You,
cool, right?
exactly. You realize like you need each other like that.
Yeah.
So take the what was it
That's cool.
the actually the 2019 Doha shot put championships,
Oh yeah.
right?
That thing was
Probably
nuts.
probably one of the best competitions, hands
Right.
down, I've seen.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been that good if you didn't have those guys wearing different uniforms, right?
Yeah.
If they were
Hmm.
all blanketed in like one shoe company's uniform, they all become kind of a little bit faceless. But do you
Right.
remember back in the day when Reese Hoffa used to compete with a luchador mask, and he was in the shot put?
Yeah.
I lived with that Adam Nelson for a while, and so it was like Adam Nelson and Reese Hoffa was in that mix, and I had an old college teammate a guy by the name of Joachim Olsen, who was
Yeah.
from Denmark, and all these guys like kind of had these personalities. But Reese Hoffa's like, I'm going to take it one step further. I'm not even going to be called Reese Hoffa. I'm just going to be the mass thrower. Throws on this luchador mask. Everybody knew it's him. And he gets out there and he's tossing the shot put around with that mask, and I'm like, okay, he's onto that. And then Nelson starts tearing off his shirt, when he's going to go into the ring.
Right.
Okay, this is stuff
We
I
need
want to
more of
see.
that.
I don't even care what
Yeah.
you're throwing.
So,
You guys couldn't be doing anything.
so the one time I met Adam Nelson, I said, "Your picture's on the backside of my toilet." So he was on the cover of Track and Field News, and I was on the backside. He goes, "What are you talking about, man?
Right?
Weirdo.
You weirdo." So
So
yeah,
you're
I mean,
saying, Joe,
that, that was
yeah,
actually the only time you met Adam Nelson. Then he's like, here's the toilet guy coming.
so we need more luchador masks, we need more good guys and bad guys, and they need to actually face off, and we need to know when it's happening.
you got it.
Right?
Because
And sell beer, for crying out loud.
yeah, the beer
And
thing. I
gambling.
mean, one of the best Olympic trials was and this was kind of funny because I talked to Pat Hitchings, who used to be at Flow Track, and he went to,
I know
he's
Pat.
from New Orleans or something like that.
Yeah.
And he couldn't believe that the Olympic trials in '92 were in New Orleans at Tad Gormley Stadium. And the
Yeah.
cool thing about that was Dan and Dave's year, right? Where that
Yep.
went
Yep.
haywire. But they sold booze, not just beer, hurricanes,
Yeah.
right? And they had the slushy drinks and all that stuff. And it's Louisiana, and you got Bourbon Street, and it was
Yeah.
awesome. It
We
was
should bring it
absolutely
back.
awesome, right? It's just like, really, I mean, you can't have beer at a track meet? Are you kidding me?
Seriously.
What? Yeah,
Do you
I
know how
mean,
much beer these have had to sneak into track stadiums for the last 2 decades based on that?
Right.
in 1984, the Aggies snuck in a keg of beer at the LA Coliseum.
Get an entire cake in a track stadium.
Well, and then when Nationals were at Stanford, this was in the 90s. Yeah, Chris Shilley snuck in a keg there too. So
Oh,
it's
so
doable.
good.
Yes,
It's doable. Kids, it's
it's
doable.
doable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never set your sights high.